So this evening we're going to have a presentation by Nels. Nels is the founding member and past president of the Los Alamos Faith and Science Forum, influenced by writings on the history of science and culture by numerous authors. He believes that it is highly likely that without the crucial influence of Christianity in human cultural history, modern science would not even exist.
The title of my talk is Saved by the Spirits. Did Religion Rescue Paleolithic Humans from Extinction? And here's a summary of the whole talk. This is all you need to know. Homo sapiens, that's us, entered the fossil record 300,000 years ago. After that, our culture, and by culture I mean the things you have to learn from others, our tools, decorations, and practices, didn't change much at all for 200,000 years. And then culture started to change rapidly about 70,000 years ago. No one knows exactly what caused this transition. But a partial answer might be that it's because we started living in larger groups, and we'll talk about why that matters. So that's a partial explanation. But no one knows exactly why we did that. Why did we start living in larger groups? But there have been many suggestions, and we'll review some proposed answers to that question. What we'll propose here in this talk is that maybe religion, and a particular form of religion known as shamanism, is what made the difference. So let's get to work. 300,000 years ago, a new species appeared in Africa, and that's us. This was the beginning of the Middle Stone Age. So the Middle Stone Age is the period from 300,000 years ago to about 70,000 years ago. And it's basically the age of Homo sapiens. Here is a computer reconstruction of a Homo sapiens skull, actually created from data from numerous skull fragments. There is not a single skull that looks this nice, this complete. From the site in Morocco, in Africa, the Jebel Irhoud site. And those fossils have now been dated to 300,000 years ago. For a long time, they were thought to be only 160,000 years old, but in 2017, was published the result that actually more accurate dating put them 300,000 years ago. Now there's several unusual things about Homo sapiens. The skeletons, the bones are different from their predecessors, but one thing is that Homo sapiens had larger brains than their predecessors. Their hominin predecessors, hominins are primates that walk on two legs. Okay. So Homo sapiens had larger brains. Now this chart shows brain volume as a function of time. Today is on the left-hand side. Long ago, 1.5 million years ago, is over here on the right-hand side. And then this is brain volume. It's actually the log base 10 of the brain volume. Here's 3, that would be 1,000 cubic centimeters. And so these symbols, the yellow symbols show results from actual fossils. This data is all from actual fossil skulls from which researchers can estimate the volume. The yellow symbols show you for Homo erectus. The green are Homo heidelbergensis. These are some of the predecessors of Homo sapiens. And Neanderthal is shown in blue here. Homo sapiens is shown in red. And really, Neanderthal and Homo sapiens are not all that different. But our brains are slightly larger than our predecessors. And here are pictures of Homo heidelbergensis skull and Homo erectus skull. These are more archaic forms of skulls with very massive eyebrow ridges, and the brain is kind of set down behind the eyes rather than up above the eyes as it is with us. So that's one thing that was different about Homo sapiens. Another thing is that Homo sapiens, we had different culture than our hominin predecessors. Remember, culture is what we have to learn. We are not born instinctively knowing what language we're going to speak. It depends on the culture we're embedded in. So the culture of Homo sapiens was new, it was different. Homo sapiens made small stone points. Here's a 1 centimeter bar. These are 3 or 4 centimeter long, very nice spear points, very sharp. Homo sapiens invented hafting. Hafting means tying that steer point to a wooden shaft to make a spear, or to a handle to make like a knife, a cutting tool. This photograph is of a modern hafted stone point. The wood does not survive 300,000 years, so it's a bit of an inference to say that these stone points were used to make spears, but archaeologists are pretty convinced that that's what was going on. Another thing we did is to make bead shells. These are snail shells that have a hole punched in them, so you can string them together on a string if you can come up with some string, maybe by from a vine or from twisting hair together or something like that. Another thing Homo sapiens did is to carry things a long distance. So this is a block of pigment. Homo sapiens liked red colored earth, red ochre. They just liked the color red, and they would carry that stuff long distances, 50 to 100 kilometers long. So, and also if you come across a stone that's a nice piece of flint and you know it's going to make a good spear point, you might want to carry that back home with you. So Homo sapiens would carry things a long distance. We spread through most of Africa by 200,000 years ago. This is a diagram showing archaeological sites all over Africa dated from 130,000 years ago, so not quite 200,000. By the way, KYA means 1,000 years ago, so 200,000 years ago. What you see, certainly by 130,000 years ago, is that these orange-colored dots, which go back to 130,000 years, they're all around the rim of Africa here. And likewise, all the way back at 200,000 years, you see these sites all around Africa. Now, researchers have looked at the presence of these cultural traces all over Africa and all through time. They can date the layers of archaeology and get pretty secure dates for the occurrence of different kinds of culture. So these colored bars show you, for example, hafting. This lavender colored bar shows you where there's evidence of hafting, tying the stone points onto a wooden shaft. The green bar here shows you where there's evidence of long distance transport. And you can determine this by looking at the chemical composition of a rock and then finding the location, the quarry from which that rock arose. So you can identify long distance transport. This red bar shows you where red ochre was used, that nice red pigment from iron oxide ore. And so they make plots like this. This is a map of Africa, East Africa actually, showing a number of archaeological sites. And a time axis here runs vertically from, if you probably can't read the labels very well, it begins 300,000 years ago at the bottom and runs up in time, 100,000, all the way up to 30,000 years ago, rather recent up here at the top. And so these bars show you where there is or is not evidence for hafting in lavender, long distance transport in green, red ochre in red, so forth. Stone points in white. So a lot of archaeology has been done in Africa, so we have this evidence. But now here's the strange thing. Oddly, very little changed over 200,000 years, from 300 to 100 KYA, except that culture, any given cultural artifact, seems to appear, disappear, and then reappear over and over during that long expanse of time. And this happens at different times in different places. So here's a comparison of North Africa and East Africa, and you see hafting goes all the way back and continues for a long time, whereas in East Africa it kind of disappears for a while, and so forth. Likewise, comparing South Africa and East Africa, again, this kind of very heterogeneous pattern of the appearance and disappearance of culture over time. So what's going on? Why would Middle Stone Age culture remain almost unchanged for 200,000 years? You and I, live in a culture that changes very rapidly. What's happened over the last 200 years? Well, we've had steam engines, electricity, democracy. What's happened over the last 5,000 years? Well, there were no pyramids 5,000 years ago, but now we have pyramids and alphabets and the wheel. That's all happened in the last 5,000 years. So immense technological changes happen in our way of looking at things. So how could it be that almost nothing changed for 200,000 years? And as I say, it wasn't entirely unchanging. It is as if it was flickering on and off. And that's the word used by these archaeologists, Sherry and Will, in their article. They say it's a mosaic pattern all over Africa, and it's flickering on and off over 200,000 years. The way they say it is that the Middle Stone Age record is peppered with the appearance, disappearance, and reinvention of key technological and social innovations. So why? Why would it remain almost unchanged? Well, maybe we are all biased to think about how smart we are and how much smarter we are than everybody else. So let's just look at a list of proposed answers. Was it a matter of biology? Is it just that people weren't very smart? Low cognitive abilities? And here I'm showing a diagram of a hand axe, probably made by Heidelbergensis or Homo erectus, perhaps as long ago as 700,000 years. A hand axe is big. It's 15 centimeters long. That's 6 inches. It's a big thing that you hold in your hand. It is pointed, and there's a lot of work that went into making it, but it's not real sharp. So you wouldn't want to hunt a large animal like an antelope with hand axes, I wouldn't think. But you might use it to carve meat off a bone if you were scavenging the prey of some large predator. You could use it maybe to break branches or cut up sticks to build a shelter, something like that. Anyway, if you like, you can think of Heidelbergensis and erectus as having less cognitive ability than Homo sapiens, maybe. Could it be that early Homo sapiens just didn't have the cognitive horsepower to come up with cultural change? Or is it that the environment was just highly unstable? This was the ice ages after all, and we know from records in the Antarctic and Arctic ice caps that the climate was varying quite rapidly on a fairly short time scale. Is it just that conditions were so bad that you just could hardly survive, and that's why culture didn't accumulate? Or was it a matter of technology? Was there just some crucial tool, some crucial invention, that would have made the difference? Or is it a matter of culture? The behaviors and practices, nothing to do at all with cognition, just some cultural way of doing things that they didn't have. So many ideas here. So let's just first of all tackle this cognitive ability question head on here. Is it possible they just weren't that smart? Well, most researchers would say today they were probably as smart as we are, okay? They probably did have all the cognitive horsepower that we have. Here, by the way, are Homo sapiens points from a cave in South Africa. These are nice 7 centimeters long, whatever, 3 inches or so. Really sharp, pointy things, great for making a spear with that. So let's think, how could we figure out how smart these people, or what's the evidence for how smart these people were? For one thing, they clearly had planning depth. Think about what it takes to haft a stone point onto a wooden shaft. You need a stone point, you need a shaft, and then you need a vine or hair or sinew or gut to make some kind of twine or string to wrap around that point and keep it on the shaft. And you've got to keep all this in your head while you're gathering these pieces. And then making the stone point is not trivial. A lot of work goes into that. So this is planning depth. Just keeping all this in your head. And that's pretty advanced. And the evidence is that Heidelbergensis and Homo erectus didn't have that kind of planning depth. Making stone points from prepared cores. These points are made from a starting block of stone that has been prepared so that when you whack it in the right way, you will flake off those sharp points that you need. That in itself exhibits planning depth. Homo sapiens exploited seasonal resources. They could look at the changing seasons and tell when the birds and the antelope are going to migrate back and forth, and they could be in the right place at the right time. And then transporting raw materials over 50 kilometers, you need to keep in mind, why am I carrying this thing again? Chimpanzees and gorillas, or chimpanzees certainly will pick up a rock and use it to break nuts, but they don't carry rocks long distances. But Homo sapiens did. Homo sapiens was adaptive and flexible. They had broad diets. They had broad ecological niches. They could live in a variety of different ecological locations. And they controlled and used fire. So based on these kind of arguments, it looks like even 300,000 years ago, we were hafting stone points onto wooden shafts. So the evidence is that their cognitive abilities were like ours. But many researchers now identify demography as the crucial issue. What is demography? That means population size, population density, and population interactions. The interactions among people. People probably lived in small, isolated groups during the Middle Stone Age. And one thing about small, isolated groups is that they are in danger of losing culture. And we know this from recent examples and also from computer simulations. Researchers have made kind of like computer games where you have interacting agents representing the social groups, and you give them different abilities for learning, culture, learning and losing and moving around and interacting. And you just find that if groups are too small, they're in danger of losing culture. And think about it. If you live in a small hunting band of, 20 or 30 people, and your very best spear maker gets attacked and killed by a lion, what are you going to do? You're out of luck. You're not, there's nowhere you can go to watch a video about how to make a spear point. You're unlikely to run into another group who has expertise in this kind of thing. So small groups are at risk. And it's this kind of thing that anthropologists are arguing would be a crucial factor all during the Middle Stone Age. These authors, Powell et al., say that demography explains 3 key features of the emergence of modern behavior. The flickering on and off in time, the mosaic pattern, that is the geographical heterogeneity of the pattern, and then the long stasis, that 200,000 years where basically very little changed. So demography is going to be a partial answer to what was going on. And this just illustrates, you think of people living in small isolated groups all around Africa. If these groups are close together, well then maybe they can interact frequently and over a sustained period of time. And if your group loses the ability to make a spear, well maybe you'll encounter another group and you'll trade your bead shells to them for their spears or something. Or I don't know, you might have a battle and you'll say, wow, I really like their spears. We got to figure out how to do that, and you'll reinvent it. Here's an example where if the groups are widely separated geographically, they just won't encounter each other, and then they'll be at risk for losing culture. And keep in mind that groups can also be isolated by their culture, not just geography. So when groups are isolated for thousands of years, their language might change. We know languages change rapidly. And they might just be unable to talk to each other. And they might start dressing differently and having different practices and behaviors. And that culture, we know culture can be a barrier between groups. And that kind of thing might have been going on during the Middle Stone Age. So the Middle Stone Age went on for more than 200,000 years, and then things started changing fast. Around 70,000 years ago, the archaeological record shows small points, stone points only a couple of centimeters long, very sharp. They look like arrowheads. And they're made by a different technique. They're made from a hammer and anvil technique. So you have an anvil stone, you put your raw material on it, and you whack it with a hammer stone. And that is it's that pattern that they identify in the archaeological record. Bladelets, small knives or razors appear in the record. This picture shows a present-day Hadza bow hunter. The Hadza are a hunter-gatherer people in Africa, and they still hunt with bows today. And so he's got quite a large, very effective bow, and they feed themselves quite well on wild game using the bow. So bows and arrows seem to have appeared around then. By 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens was moving into the rainforest of Africa. There's no evidence of people living in the rainforest until about 30 or 40,000 years ago. It's hard to live in a rainforest, and you have to be pretty good at hunting and have good hunting weapons to live in a rainforest. Homo sapiens was also moving up into Europe and Asia and staying, even when the Ice Age got really, really cold about 30,000 years ago. Homo sapiens had figured out how to live in Europe. So something big happened in this period, 70,000 to 50,000 years ago. By 40,000 years ago, figurative art appears. This is the Lion Man of Hollensteinstadel, made of mammoth ivory 40,000 years ago. It seems to be the figure of a man with the head of a lion. Nothing like this appears over the Middle Stone Age. Something happened that triggered this consistent and exponential pattern of cultural change that we now see in the later Stone Age. The later Stone Age is, of course, what follows the Middle Stone Age. So what made the difference? That's the big question. The importance of demography as a partial answer probably means that either the population started growing larger, or people started living in larger groups, or groups began interacting more often and for longer. Although these demographic hypotheses remain speculative, according to Sherry and Will here. Well, while these hypotheses may be speculative, one thing we have is the ability from genomics now, from the genetic material that we can obtain from present-day humans as well as Neanderthals, gives us a way to estimate population size. And it's kind of complicated how it worked. I gave a talk at the Lenten seminar a few months ago with my dim understanding of how it works, but basically there is a way. I'll say a word or two about it, but let me tell you that this plot shows population size as a function of time, where again, today is on the left, long ago, in this case 10 million years ago, is over here on the right. And this is the size of the population of interbreeding Homo sapiens, or actually earlier than Homo sapiens, as determined from various ethnic groups all around the world. There's a whole variety of ethnic groups, but they all tell the same story, that there was kind of a peak in the population here 300,000 years ago at the beginning of the Middle Stone Age, and then it started to decline. Well, does this mean the population was actually decreasing? Or does it actually mean that people were just living in small groups, and those small groups were becoming more and more isolated all during the Middle Stone Age? That's kind of what this looks like. And if you can imagine that not only was there geographical isolation, but also cultural isolation, that would fit this pattern of basically reduced genetic diversity. That's what this is showing here. A smaller and smaller group of interbreeding people as the Middle Stone Age proceeds up here to the present time. Then you see populations rising rapidly after the Middle Stone Age. So that's this transition that we're hoping to learn something about. So this kind of data supports the speculation on the prior slide that demography was making a difference during the Middle Stone Age, that people were not interacting. Was humanity on the way to extinction? Well, as I say, maybe the population was not decreasing, it's just that groups were interacting less. But, you know, when you look at Neanderthal, we do have DNA from Neanderthal now. Here's Neanderthal and a related species, the Denisovans. They faded away here starting about 500,000 years ago, and then they just never came back. So possibly Homo sapiens was on that same track. But something saved us, and just keep in mind that it's good to belong to a group. Living in groups decreases predation risk. You're less likely to be jumped by a lion if you're in a larger group. And by the way, this is Stone Age wisdom that we can apply right here in Los Alamos today. So if you go hiking in a group, you're much less likely to encounter a bear than if you go hiking by yourself. I read that in a flyer just the other day. Hike in groups. A group provides communal defense, so it's defense against two-legged predators. A group allows for coordinated caretaking of offspring. There are more potential parents and grandparents in a larger group. A group facilitates the technological retention, specialization, and innovation. So that's this issue of you're less likely to lose the ability to make some crucial item of technology that you need. Technology just means tools, you know. So we're talking about stone technology here. Living in a group protects against calamity like, you know, a volcano, an earthquake, a tsunami, a typhoon. And it increases genetic diversity, of course, which is good. And generally, the bigger the group, the better. There are probably limits to that, but groups are good. Okay, so let's come to some answers now that we have this demographic hypothesis. Let's sharpen up our question a little bit. What could have caused the demographic changes at the end of the Middle Stone Age? So there have been a lot of proposals. Here are some of the authors below that have proposed these ideas. Maybe it was more diverse habitats, greater niche breadth. Maybe people just started trying to live in even more out of the way, remote, difficult to live places, and they succeeded, and then that led to increased population size. Maybe it's that they just had more diverse diets. They started eating things they didn't used to eat, and this is specifically this idea of exploiting coastal resources, that people started eating seafood. So, eat seafood, go out and eat it. We know it's good for you. And this one group has proposed, because they find ancient mollusk shells in archaeological sites, they know that people were eating limpets and clams, and that could lead to improved survival rates and larger populations. Maybe Homo sapiens was transporting raw material even longer distances than they used to, so that they could encounter more groups of other people. And the more people they encounter, the more ability to remember and innovate new technology. That could be good. Likewise, long-term exchange networks, trading some item, your bead necklace for a good stone point. Networks of exchange. Or maybe there were new ways of social organization, increasing group connectivity. And we'll come back to that. And I keep wondering, why doesn't anybody just propose that it was the bow and arrow? Somebody invented the bow and arrow. Or the spear thrower. The Australian Aborigines do not have the bow and arrow, but they have spear throwers. They have a hinged stick. You put the spear in the socket of a hinged stick, and you can throw a spear a very long way at very high speed. Maybe I've seen people at the park using something like that to throw a tennis ball for their dog, and you can really throw things a long way with a spear thrower. But I haven't read any actual archaeologists say, it's the bow and arrows, that's what made the difference. I don't know. But as long as we're throwing out ideas, why not that one? But I want to come back now to this point here, that various people have proposed that it was something new, some new social organization, some new cultural thing that Homo sapiens happened upon that made the difference and allowed them to live in larger groups. Okay, let's think about then other ways of social organization that could increase group connectivity. And so here now I'm going to show the obligatory photograph of Emil Durkheim. You remember James Carroll showed a picture of Emil Durkheim, one of the founders of sociology. He lived died in 1917, early part of the 20th century. Sociology, the study of human society, was just getting going back in those days. Durkheim identified two kinds of social glue, we can think of it. Two things that allow people to live together in large groups. In large, complex societies like our society, what the secret is division of labor. We divide up all the jobs, and then we depend on people who do the other jobs. Who do you depend on? You depend on the people who drive the food delivery trucks and stock the shelves at the grocery store, and I hope you thank them when you see them, because if they didn't stock the shelves, we wouldn't have food at the grocery store. We depend on them. We don't even know their names. We depend on all kinds of people. We have no idea who they are. And we live in a society of millions and millions of people. And that's the way we do it, according to Emil Durkheim. Division of labor. But it's different in a small egalitarian society, like the hunter-gatherer groups that probably characterize the Middle Stone Age. They are bound together by their common beliefs, norms, and morals. And common belief starts to sound like religion. It's the religion of that small society that keeps them together. Here's a photograph of Donald Tuzin, an anthropologist who in the 1970s went to Papua New Guinea to study a village there in New Guinea, a particular village that happened to be 10 times larger, 8 to 10 times larger than any of the neighboring villages, of which there are many in that part of Papua New Guinea. And he wrote several books about it, and What it comes down to basically is that without intending to, the people of that village had created a religion, a kind of cultic ritual practice that required the participation of all the clans in that village to work the rituals correctly so they did not antagonize the Tambaran, who were the kind of spirits, slightly unpleasant spirits who watched over them. So the result was that this ritual practice bound together many of these kinship groups and clans that otherwise would, like every other village, would have split up and gone their ways. So both Tuzin and Durkheim identified religious practice and belief as a very important method that people unconsciously, see, the elders of this village had no idea that they were developing a religion that was going to allow them to grow. It just happened. So this is a way that unconsciously humans developed to bind larger and larger groups together. So both Durkheim and Tuzin and many other researchers have made similar points. Religious beliefs and practices play this important role in building up communities. Now it's time to define religion again. James Carroll 2 weeks ago defined religion, again using Durkheim's definition, but I'll just point out Durkheim begins by saying religious phenomena always suppose a bipartite division of the whole universe. That means a two-part division of the whole universe into two classes which embrace all that exists, but which radically exclude each other. And these are the sacred things and the profane things. And Durkheim says a religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things. That is to say, things set apart and forbidden. And these beliefs and practices unite into one single moral community, all those who adhere to them. So what I want to propose is that perhaps it was religious practices and beliefs that led to scaling up the Middle Stone Age group sizes and group interactions. Okay, great. You know, a lot of people have thrown out ideas, and so here's another one. Can we ever possibly know anything about religion during the Stone Age? You know, is this doomed to be just an idle speculation forever? Okay, that's the question we want to tackle now. What can we possibly know about what was going on during the Stone Age? So let's hold on to that idea, hold on to that question, and let's look at this research. Researchers from Cambridge University have studied the religions of present-day hunter-gatherer societies. Now, there's no guarantee that a present-day hunter-gatherer society tells us anything at all about what was going on 100,000 or 300 or 70,000 years ago is what we want to look at. There's no guarantee. So let's proceed very carefully as these researchers do. They have data on 33 hunter-gatherer groups from, as you see on the map, Africa, South Asia, Australia, North Asia, and North and South America. And the great thing is that there is data on all these groups. There's linguistic data about their languages, there's genetic data, and there's ethnographic data, meaning anthropological descriptions of their culture. And in some cases, there's archaeological data as well. So the first step of these researchers was to create a phylogeny, that is a family tree of these 33 societies, using linguistic data and genetic data. Okay, so I think notionally, intuitively, you can get an idea that this works by grouping together those societies that are similar in some ways, and societies that are similar are going to be more closely related than societies that are less similar, using their languages, using their actual genomes. You can identify who's closely related to whom. And not surprisingly, groups that are geographically close to one another are indeed more closely related. That's pretty obvious. So here's Africa, South Asia, Australia, Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia, North America, and South America. And so this is a family tree done in this way. Now, here's where it gets interesting. They time calibrate the branch lengths using linguistic data, molecular data, I think that means genetic data, and archaeological data. So these numbers now showing the branches indicate the time in thousands of years ago. So here's 90,000 years ago. And what happened then? 90,000 years ago, the predecessors of the African groups branched off from the predecessors of all the other groups that went off to Asia and Australia and so forth. 60,000 years ago, this set of African groups branched off from a different set of African groups. And likewise, you just go all the way down here. 20,000 years ago, the predecessors of the North American, or this set of North American groups branched off from this set of North American and the South American groups. So anyway, this is done using archaeology as well as linguistic data. I think linguists have an idea of how rapidly languages evolve. So all that data goes into this kind of phylogenetic inference, and it's a mathematical technique to build up a family tree like this. Okay, then now these researchers examined 7 traits of the religions of these hunter-gatherer groups, 7 characteristics of the religion. So they include animism, belief in an afterlife, shamanism, ancestor worship, the worship of high gods, active ancestor worship, and active high gods. Active means that those ancestors or those high gods actually participate in your life, and you can pray to them and they will change your life. There are societies that believe that worship the ancestors, but they don't believe the ancestors can play any role in their present-day life. So that would be this kind of non-active ancestor worship. So 100% of these hunter-gatherer groups believe in animism. Animism means the belief that everything has a spirit, okay? Trees, rocks, rivers, mountains, clouds, everything has a spirit. Of course, people and animals have spirits, obviously, but everything has a spirit in animism. Belief in an afterlife, okay, the idea that although your body dies, your spirit goes somewhere else. Shamanism, I'll come back to that. And notice that these are rather frequently found, but not everywhere, shamanism, afterlife. Whereas active high gods, it's rather rare for a hunter-gatherer group to believe in active high gods. Okay, so now there is a mathematical technique by which you can infer the probability that a given trait, let's say shamanism, existed at a branch point in the past. So you see, this is how this time telescope works. It is a way of looking back in time to make inferences about what was going on 90,000, 60,000 years ago. And so now these colored circles indicate the probability that shamanism, in this particular case, white means shamanism is absent, red means it's present. They do this for all 7 traits, and I'm just showing the diagram here for shamanism. The probability of a trait is represented by the fraction of this circle that's colored, and you can't see it very well here, but here I've blown it up. You can see that this circle is about a little more than halfway colored red at 90,000 years ago. Here almost, or more than 75% at 65,000 years ago. So now I'll just write the probabilities here on the diagram. And so you see that through our time telescope, we have 56% possibility that shamanism existed 90,000 years ago. This is, keep in mind what this is. This is showing us that our time telescope gets fuzzier and fuzzier the further back in time we go. That's what that 56% means. They were a little fuzzy at 90,000 years ago, but there's some greater than 50-50 odds that shamanism was being practiced back then. Okay, what is shamanism? So I ask, could Stone Age shamanism have provided social cohesion as described by Durkheim and Tuzin, because there is greater than 50% odds that it existed? So what is shamanism? Shamanism is a religion, it's a cosmology, it's a way of life. A cosmology is a description of the contents and structure of the world, okay? So that's not a religion, that's like cosmology is a science today. We would call it cosmology a science. But shamanistic cosmology says there is a world tree. There's one tree that holds up the world. The roots of the tree run down to the underworld. The high branches of the tree run up to the heavens. And we live in the midworld here, the lower branches of the tree. Shamanism includes many ritual practices and interaction with spirits. And I should say that shamanism is quite diverse all around the world. Shamanism in Australia is rather different from shamanism in South America. But there are these trends and threads that connect them. Shamanism always involves healing and divination. Divination means forecasting the future. There is always initiations, that is the life passages. Puberty initiation is always an important part of all human societies. The enforcement of social norms and the creation of ritual alliances and secret societies. Shamanism depends on the shaman. The shaman is an individual who is a socially recognized ritual intercessor, healer, and problem solver. The shaman mediates between the earthly and the spirit worlds to promote cohesion and physical and mental well-being in the society. And here's a photograph of a First Nations shaman, an indigenous Canadian shaman, taken in about 1920. The shaman enters altered states of consciousness. So dreams, visions and revelations, reveries, hallucinations, trances, in some cases intoxication, and out-of-body experiences are important in shamanism. Here's a photograph of a Mongol shaman taken in 1909, and he's holding a drum, just like that First Nations shaman was holding a drum. Shamans have drums almost all the time. One of these researchers, and that's David Lewis Williams here, who's at the University of Johannesburg. He's an expert on the San Bushman people of South Africa. He writes that perhaps we've been focused too much on the evolution of intelligence and not enough on the evolution of consciousness. And so there is evidence that while Neanderthal may have been as intelligent as we are, perhaps Neanderthal was not paying attention to some of the things that we are conscious of, like dreams, visions, hallucinations. The shaman, when in a trance, the shaman provides services to the community, such as healing or divination. The shaman travels to the heavens or the underworld, or claims to travel to the heavens or to the underworld, and claims to have immediate concrete interactions with gods and spirit helpers who give power to the shaman. So the spirit helpers are often animals. You've heard of your spirit animal? Well, that's a shamanistic concept. Here is a drawing from 1692 done by a European traveler in Siberia, showing a Siberian shaman. He's got his drum, of course. Okay, well, what's the social value of shamans? I mean, maybe you have an idea from this list of things that shamans do. Well, many anthropologists describe these functions. The shaman increases social cohesion and cooperation, carries out psychological and social integration with ritual healing. Shamans enable dramatic rituals that bind the group members together in a common goal. These rituals, when you get a lot of people in a group all doing the same ritual, this reaffirms social solidarity, and they are social signals of commitment to group norms. Underlining the importance of group norms is crucial. You know, that we all abide by group norms is what allows us to trust one another. When we find people who don't abide by norms, we're all inclined to go, well, I'm not sure whether I trust that person. Here is a artwork depicting a trance dance of the San people in South Africa. So here's the question that we want to tackle. Could shamanism have led to larger effective population size? Now this is just hypothesizing. Perhaps shamanism could cause roaming clans of hunter-gatherers to interact more often and for longer periods in several ways. Shaman healers could attract clans who valued healing. There are, in present-day groups, shamans who are known as great shamans who have very widely appreciated healing power. And someone like that will attract people from all over. Even if clans were mutually suspicious, a great shaman like that could allow those clans, those groups to interact a little longer than they would otherwise have, perhaps. This example from Papua New Guinea shows that shamans could conceive and carry out initiation rituals requiring the cooperation of diverse clans. So now it's not optional for the clans to get along. Now they have to, or they will upset the Tambaran spirits. Shamans are also storytellers, singers, dancers, and magicians. Perhaps they were the first storytellers, singers, dancers, and magicians. So if nothing else, a shaman could attract people just like a rock festival will attract a lot of people to show up at the rock festival. Clowns such as the Hopi Koshare, and here is this is a figurine, a carved figurine made by Wilmer Kay of a Hopi Koshare Kachina. The Koshare are in many ways like shamans. They enforce social norms, communicate taboos, and diffuse community tensions. They're clowns. They make people laugh, and that takes the pressure off in some cases. One thing about shamanism is that it doesn't cause theological arguments, and that's because shamanism seems to be inherently syncretistic and not rigorously logical. Shamans aren't making metaphysical propositions whose truth, false value they need to determine. They're not doing that. Syncretism means you just add your religion onto whatever other religion you run into. And we just see examples. That's what happened in Ilahita, this village in Papua New Guinea. They had been defeated in warfare by a neighboring village 150 years ago. And they just said, well, those gods must be at least as good as our gods, maybe better. And they just took them and they stuck them on. And that's how then they created this new religion that allowed the village to grow to this much larger size. They didn't know that's what was going to happen, but that's what they did. Siberian shamanism already today, and there are shamans in Siberia, that combine elements of Eastern Orthodox Christianity, Buddhism, and traditional shamanism, very syncretistically. You just add all these religions together. I would say that modern Hinduism, and I didn't get a chance to talk to Victoria about this, modern Hinduism combines a great variety of traditional elements, and to me it looks like the effect of many millennia probably, of adding various religions together to create what goes on in India today. Here is a painting of Jagannath. Jagannath is a Hindu deity that is linked to indigenous tribes. The adherents of Jagannath today claim to be descended from indigenous tribes, and Jagannath could very well be some tribal deity, that is now considered to be an avatar of Shiva or Vishnu, and is part of what goes on in modern day India. Jagannath is the name from which we get the term juggernaut, which means a very large vehicle, which is part of some of their rituals. They make a very large cart, very ornately decorated. And then, as I say, conflict over metaphysical propositions is very unlikely to arise in shamanistic religion. Unlike Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, where we argue about metaphysical propositions all the time. Because truth and falsity matter to us, and that is one of the reasons we have modern science, because it's important to discover what assertions about the universe are true and which ones are false. But that's neither here nor there for tonight's purposes. It helps if you want to keep a group together. It helps if you don't have to argue about every little fine theological point that comes up. Shamanism exists all around the world. We looked at that study of the 3,300 gatherer groups. Those groups were just kind of, you remember that map, it didn't show any dots in the middle of Eurasia, of Central Asia or Europe, but for sure there was shamanism in ancient times in Central Asia and Europe. In fact, the Sami people of northern Scandinavia, reindeer herders, they have shamans. They certainly had shamanism in historical times. It's so pervasive, in fact, that it suggests that it characterized the lives of many ancestral humans, as we saw. And you do see these traces in large world religions today. It's kind of fun to look at the traces of shamanism in Judeo-Christianity. So did the spirits save us? Well, we can speculate that it's the evolution of consciousness, not just intelligence, that's the crucial item here. And that Homo sapiens began noticing dreams, visions, altered states of consciousness, hallucinations at some crucial point in the past. That shamans arose, shamans who were specialists in this kind of experience, and they linked the humans and the spirit world. And then possibly paying attention to spirits then led to stronger, larger communities. I like to look at the words of Genesis chapter 2. Out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the air and brought them to the man, Adam, to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. And to me this sounds like perhaps Adam was the first shaman, and he did talk to a snake, and the snake talked back to him, because that's what shamans do. They talk to animals. And so paying attention to spirits, it was the spirits perhaps who saved us, which theistically I look at as God's earliest attempts to get humans to pay attention to something other than the routine of daily life. I have to say in passing that we see references to sort of a New Age shamanism, modern Western shamanism. I love going to the Ark bookstore in Santa Fe, where they have books and books and books on shamanism and witchcraft and just all kinds of cool occult stuff, which people love. People love this stuff, this is deeply embedded in the human psyche. But I have to say that New Age shamanism looks very individualistic to me. It doesn't look to me like the enforcement of social norms or the coherence of the larger group in which the shaman is embedded, so I'm not sure it's on the right track. But perhaps it was the spirits then that saved us. Thank you.
So before we start, I think what we'll do this evening is have question and answer period, and then break into table discussions. On the back of the sheet that has Nell's stuff is biography and summary is some questions that he's put forth to us. And but before we get there, I'd like to go ahead and say we're going to take a week break next week, so you all can travel wherever you want to go. So we'll get back together again on July 8th and hear Joyce Gusick talk about expansion on the book Just Six Numbers by Martin Rees. So this is getting into the six constants of the universe, and that's going to be a lead-in for Harshmas that'll be talking on July 15th on God and the multiverse. So, okay, questions and answers. Let's see, maybe I can ask Susan Sprague to take the microphone again, and I'll sit at the Zoom table and see if there's anybody there with questions. Yeah.
Do we have any questions? Convenient.
So, can you hear me well enough, everyone? Yeah, okay. Nels, I couldn't help but feel like we're already a community that's just chock full of shaman. We call them scientists, but there's a really strong resemblance. We're talking about people who can heal, who can predict the future, who can do all sorts of useful things. I think, I don't think that's a specious observation. I think that what the shaman was someone who was an expert in certain things that were important to people and of vital importance to them. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I would not actually call most scientists shamans. All shamans are healers, but not all healers are shamans, and so forth. Certainly you see the beginning. You see the beginnings of science in shamanism, don't you? I mean, you see a cosmology. You see the need to tell a story to explain things. Shamans, they enter the spirit world and then they come back and tell a story about what they saw there, and often that story is intended to divine the future, to forecast the future, and that's this human need to forecast the future. And today we have much more reliable ways of forecasting the future. So.
It's a way of controlling the uncontrollable.
Or dealing with the uncontrollable. We don't always control the uncontrollable. We do better than they did 70,000 years ago, but it's important for us to deal with the uncontrollable for sure. There's so much. See, I mean, if shamans were the first storytellers, dancers, singers, and magicians, well, there are a whole lot of other present-day people whose roots go back to shamanism. So yeah, scientists, but also, actors, dancers, singers, storytellers, religious leaders, obviously. Here comes the microphone.
If you are looking for the basics, the origins of those kind of things, have they looked at the hunter-gatherers that we see now and try to figure out or find out if they what they thought about the world? I'm sure they all think there must be something strange because things don't work out and this and that. And it would seem to me that it would help us get an idea of how this all got started if we could look at what the present hunter-gatherers come up with.
Well, you saw that list of 7 traits of present-day hunter-gatherer societies that included animism, of course, but also belief in an afterlife, worship of ancestors, worship of high gods, and so forth. So there's plenty of ethnographic material. Okay, all those cultures are pretty well described. So yeah. Well, you find a lot of diversity. I mean, if you're hoping to track down on the the fundamental correctness of any specific belief, there's so much diversity, I'm not sure you would make much headway that way. And anyway, you're looking at it in a very metaphysical proposition, truth-false attitude, which is not the way we should approach shamanism, I don't think.
On industrial scale, whaling in the 19th century was done on ships where there were factories that would parcel the whales into blubber and whalebone and teeth and whatever. I maintain that megafauna hunting and processing in the Paleolithic was done on industrial scale. In southern Moravia of the Czech Republic, there are places called Pavlov and Dolní Věstonice, where there's a plethora of products made from mammoth bone and mammoth teeth. There's another one called Kostienki in Ukraine. And these were also factories. And I propose that large gathering of people before the agricultural revolution was done in hunting mammoths and processing them for trade everywhere. The long fibrous wool of mammoths for ropes and strings and such, the fat for fuel, meats smoked and salted, etc. So anyway, in my opinion, the gathering into large groups was done by cartels which processed mammoths and other mega.
Of course, in Africa, it would have to be elephants, I guess. Maybe there will be evidence of large-scale processing of elephants and other megafauna in Africa, but I don't know that we have evidence for that yet.
I was wondering if you had data that tracked back burial rituals, or what we know from archaeology of burials, and shamanism, because I think if you did that, you would take your ideas of shamanism much further back. And I just want to make a comment. I spent quite a bit of time working with Diné people, Navajos, and so the medicine man they didn't hold knowledge that was separate. They just held, there's a metaphysical aspect to it. They held a deeper connection because I met very traditional people, and they didn't see a separation. They didn't see a separation of themselves from the land and the events in their lives. And you go to the medicine man because they had a greater, deeper understanding and knowledge of, passed down knowledge of songs and rituals that would bring you back into balance.
So that was a kind of a healing function, then, the songs and rituals to restore balance. Sounds like, yeah.
Excuse me?
Hi, Nels. Thanks for an interesting talk. I guess as far as hard evidence of old very old cultures like Stonehenge, and now I think there's more recent things. There's even some things older than Stonehenge, and in Turkey and around the world there are a lot of stone circles and all. And so this is evidence, I guess, of people, having abilities, to do these things. And also most of them had to do with religion, and even maybe the beginnings of science with astronomy. So I don't know if this ties in with shamanism as such, and as he was alluding, there was an agricultural revolution at some point. So when people stopped being hunter-gatherers and started farming, then it was more of a social cohesion in one area, and cities developed and all that. So I'm sure religion was a part of it, because with the stone circles and all, that was all religious, I think. But so anyway, so that's, and I think more recently that there's some they discovered some older circles pre-Stonehenge, maybe 10,000 years ago or something. So anyway, so that's, if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, I think Stonehenge is probably about 5,000 years old, if I'm right. And then you may be referring to Göbekli Tepe, which is, 11,000 years old, Victoria? Say again? Yeah, Victoria's been there, so I don't know that she was officiating or anything, but anyway. It's a larger question. To what degree is human progress driven by religion? If you want to put it that way. And when Göbekli Tepe was discovered, what was surprising about it was that it seemed to be a very large ceremonial structure out in the middle of nowhere, built at a time when everyone was a hunter-gatherer. It was like there was no agriculture going on at the time. And this mystified everybody, because I think the standard point of view had been, agriculture occurred, and then people started building cities, and then cities had kings, and then the kings needed to invent a way to keep all the people down, so they invented religion. There was that kind of way of thinking. But Göbekli Tepe seemed to indicate a possibility that no, people were gathering together to worship or to carry out rituals. We don't know what the practices were. When they were just hunter-gatherers, and that they just gathered at this place that is, has the massive stone structures and elaborate carvings, very artistic. I think subsequently, building foundations have been discovered in the vicinity of Göbekli Tepe, so there was some kind of settlement there. But whether that qualifies as sort of a large agriculturally based city, I don't know. I was talking to Victoria and Julia about that a couple of weeks ago. But we need somebody to follow Göbekli Tepe better than I have. I don't know much about what they found lately.
I have one comment, if I may. So a lot of the shamanism that you've displayed has to do with drums and acoustics. And one of the things that we've noticed in any of our research is what brings people together is either songs or hymns or some form of acoustics. And I always recalled, for those of you that know or have heard of Dipen Sinha, he would always use acoustics as the basics of what would bring people together, either to calm, to heal, or to worship. And I think that that is a beautiful demonstration of something we're still learning about via our science, through our scientists.
The drum, the shaman calls the drum the horse or the boat by which he goes to the spirit world. And I was going to come back to this distinction between scientists and shamans. Shamans always enter an altered state of consciousness. When we pursue science, you could say we're in an altered state of consciousness. In a way, focused attention is an altered state of consciousness. But the shaman always enters the spirit world and then interacts with the spirits and has immediate, the shaman claims that he interacts with the spirits. And I should say that there are women shamans as well as male shamans. Yeah, the drum is crucial. Entering the altered state of consciousness is done in many, many different ways around the world, but drumming and dancing is a very important part of that.
So, no, you don't have to take it out. Okay, so I guess we'll go ahead into table discussions if we want, or general discussions, whatever you want to do. Thank you so much for your attendance.
Did you put my questions on any piece of
Yes,
paper?
they're on the back side of your biography and stuff. Yeah, there's, okay. Oh, yeah. Yeah, on the back side of Nell's biography and abstract are 3 questions that he stated.
For those of you that wish to further discuss this topic, please join different tables, and we'll spend a few moments on the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Susan.